Welcome to session 170 of the Scanner School podcast, where we teach you everything you want to know about the scanner radio hobby. Today's podcast is sponsored by this month's webinar, Why Every Scanner User Needs a Software-Defined Radio, the number one underrated tool that should be in your setup. This free live webinar will be held tonight, March 23rd, 2021 at 8 p.m. Eastern U.S. time. Virtual seats are still limited and available, and you can sign up at scannerschool.com/webinar. Now, if you're listening to this podcast after that date, don't worry. You can still go to scannerschool.com/webinar and catch a replay. All the notes from today's podcast can be found on our website at scannerschool.com/session 170. Before we start this week's podcast, I'd like to take a moment to thank our Patreon supporters. Patreon is a month-to-month sponsorship platform. We have 3 different support tiers, each with different benefits. But the most valuable tier is our $5 a month tier. This equates to sponsoring the podcast for about $1 per episode. Now, not only do our $5 Patreon supporters receive the podcast early, but they also receive a commercial-free version of the podcast delivered directly to their podcast player. Some may say that the included squelchy sticker pack that is mailed to your home is the best benefit of the $5 level, but I think it's the community or the club that is growing at this level. You see, we meet once a month on Zoom, and we have a roundtable discussion about scanning, ask questions, offer advice. Some of the members are answering other people's questions, and we just talk with our fellow Scanner School classmates. This is an exclusive group for our $5 Patreon members. Now, again, if all this wasn't enough at that level, you'll also receive discounts to upcoming Scanner School courses and offerings. Now, you can help support Scanner School by going to www.scannerschool.com/Patreon or www.scannerschool.com/support. Now, I'd like to thank all of our Patreon supporters at all levels, and they are Blurpy Benner, Brian King, Buzz Gold, Chris Paris, Craig Harper, Dan, David C., Denny Crotty, Ed Walsh, Eddie K., Edward Bramblett, Evan Barak, Gary Fletcher, Guy Lee, James Broxson, James Felling, James Peruta, Jeff Block, Jenny Taylor, Jim Heinrich, John Goldenberg, Ken Newberry, Kevin Zwicky, Lenny Bauer, Les Stevenson, Mark Beebe, Mason Kramer, Michael Kroger, Paul Teal, Raymond Hill, Richard Armstrong, Robert Kanzler, Ronnie Bach, Sal Marandola, Tim Mazza, Ted Glendy, and William R. Cand. Now let's start the podcast.
Welcome to The Scanner School, a podcast dedicated to the scanner radio hobby. Class is about to begin. Here is your host, Phil Lichtenberger.
My name is Phil Lichtenberger, and my amateur radio call sign is W2LE, and welcome back to Scanner School. This podcast is here to teach you everything to know about the scanner radio hobby, and we are looking to help you with your scanner radio questions. If something about this hobby has you just a little bit confused, a little bit stumped, you need a little bit extra help, we're here to help. Every Tuesday, the first Tuesday rather, of every month, we host an Ask Scanner School session. Not only do we host it here on the podcast, but we also host a live YouTube and Facebook, and now we're on Twitter or Periscope. We're answering questions, okay? But I need your questions to answer those questions. So leave us a voicemail message at 516-308-2885 or use the speak pipe button on the Ask page. Again, scannerschool.com/ask. Now, again, why those 2 sessions or those 2 reasons? Because if you use our speak pipe or our voicemail number, you'll be in the running for a free tutoring call. Okay. Again, you can still leave us an email or a message via that portal as well. But again, we like to incentivize you to come on the podcast and ask your question in person. Okay. So today we are joined by our first guest from the United Kingdom. And I am very excited that it is Jon Hudson, one of the co-creators of the SDRplay device. Jon Hudson teamed up with some other UK engineers to create SDRplay Limited, and they created one of the best wideband software-defined receivers on the market. Not only does SDRplay make and design their own hardware, but they've also have their own software that complements the hardware perfectly. It is a beauty. It is gorgeous the way that these 2 things work together. And when you design the hardware and the software to work hand in hand, it's magic. So I'm not going to dwell on this because we talk about a lot of this in our conversation. So I'd like to welcome Jon Hudson, G4ABQ, onto the podcast. Jon, thank you so much for joining us today on the Scanner School podcast. It's really an honor to have you on here.
Well, it's great to be invited. Thanks, Phil.
Great, thank you. So can you tell us a little bit, you guys developed a SDR product. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you guys have been working on?
Okay, well, we've, for the last few years, been bringing out SDR radios, primarily for the hobby market. I guess radio amateurs probably form the biggest sort of group of customers, but we basically make an SDR, a software-defined radio. And what an SDR is, if you imagine traditionally, a radio had to take those signals from your antenna and select the ones you wanted, filter out the ones you don't, convert that into a signal that can be demodulated in the case of voice. In the case of digital signals, you had to then feed it on into a computer. It was all done traditionally with hardware. And going back probably 20 years ago, the first computers were powerful enough to start to be able to do a significant amount of the signal chain processing in software on a host computer. And that meant you could partition the task of taking a radio signal and just doing a certain amount of pre-processing and preparation and then an analog to digital conversion to convert that radio signal into a stream of data that a computer was capable of going on to process. And over time, as computers have got more and more powerful and lower cost, it means that your average Windows laptop of 5 or 10 years old even is perfectly adequate to allow you to pick up quite a span of spectrum all in one go. And this means two things. One is that you can visualize the signals instead of just having to spin that dial to spot them. And the second thing is that you can post-process multiple signals simultaneously within that slice of spectrum. And as time goes on, the spectrum sizes get bigger and the processing power gets more and more. And we're on this kind of journey of ever-improving capability. So SDRplay is about 7 years old as a company, and we're just a small group of engineers in the UK from quite an eclectic background. But at the core of it was some people from a company called Mirix, and led by a guy called Simon Atkinson, who's the kind of chief architect and visionary, if you like. He had worked with Mirix at software-defined radio technology for embedding in cell phones and high-end computers, because going back a few years, the real high-end cell phones also had a radio feature built in, so you could actually pick up multiple, depending on what country of the world you're in. The Japanese were watching terrestrial TV. People were often using FM with headphones. Right. These chips were kind of like almost over-spec'd. They could cover from long wave up to L-band. And obviously as time went on, 5G came, the Wi-Fi was ubiquitous, and of course the cell phone guys, they want to know what you're consuming, so they don't really want you kind of just zooming around, tuning into stuff for yourself. Right, you could argue they could Shazam what you're listening to music-wise. So actually that market kind of just plateaued and then fell away. And but what Mirix found was people, just as they were starting to use the really cheap TV dongles, said, hey, your chips are really cool. You could come up with basically a communications receiver covering from long wave to up to 2 gigs. Can we buy the chips? And the problem with that is that it's a very niche market, and getting those, we suddenly thought, well, why don't we set about creating this fantastic capability that's kind of one up from the cheap dongles that gives for, and our entry product is $119 from HRO. Right. The RSP1A is as cheap as we could make it. It's single antenna in, a USB connection. You plug it into your PC, and you've got this fantastic receiver. So we started in 2014. We had the very original RSP1. We've now actually got 3 production products. So there's the RSP1A, which is, like I say, the entry-level product, which has the basic functionality of 1 kilohertz to 2 gigahertz coverage, and you can see a slice of spectrum of up to 10 megahertz anywhere going from 1 kilohertz to 2 gigahertz. So that's our entry-level product. Okay. And then we've got the Rspdx, that's more like a couple of $100, but that comes in a rugged steel case. It really looks nice on the desk. And the key thing here is it's got multiple antennas. Right. So this, because there's really no single antenna that can cover, shortwave and dump 1090 ADS-B simultaneously. So you typically, as you spin that dial with multiple antenna sockets, it will allow you to switch from one antenna to another without having to kind of keep unplugging and plugging them in again. So it's got these software and selectable antenna ports. It's also got some enhanced performance for very low frequencies below 2 megahertz. It's got an external clock input for GPS accuracy for very, very accurate frequency adjustment. And then, actually, particularly of interest to the aircraft spotters is the RSP Duo, which is actually a dual tuner version of the RSP family. So here you can simultaneously look at two totally separate bits of spectrum at the same time. For example, you could be using one for ADS-B, listening, picking up the telemetry, all the flight information that ends up on Flight Radar 24, but picking up directly from the aircraft in your vicinity, while at the same time, with the other tuner, you could be down on 120 megs, 118 to 136 ATC spectrum, listening to the voice channels. So it's at the moment you have to kind of just set this up yourself, and one of the things we're working on is a plugin which will do all the setup automatically for you for those two applications at the same time. So that's what we do. We create the hardware, we design them, and I guess a lot of people start out with SDR. The cheapest way to start out is to get a good quality RTL SDR dongle. These are like $20-$30. Beware of some of the fake cheap versions. Or
the very early generations, right?
Or some of the early ones.
Yes.
There's still quite a learning curve there. They are, tricky, but if budgets are tight. The great thing with this stuff is, Phil, if you've already got a computer, if you've already got a PC, that's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. You already own half the hardware.
You own most of the radio right there. It's just the computer, right?
You just got to get an antenna and the front something, and the dongle will get you going. It doesn't cover the span that we've got. It doesn't give you as much visibility. It's quite sensitive, and depending on where you live, they're very prone to problems of interference from big interferers. The sort of things we just to say the difference when you pay a bit more and have an RSP is you get, a whole bunch of front end filters. Okay. You get notch filters for the big interferers like overhead DAB, AM band, FM band, where the big megawatt transmitters may be, causing all sorts of artifacts and problems. You can basically notch those out, and that just hammers them with a 40 or 50 dB attenuation for those problem areas, and it just gives you cleaner signals. So when you get started, you with the dongle. The other thing is that as the software changes, what we try to do, because we produce our own SDRuno software for Windows, we take a lot of time to try to ensure that it works seamlessly out of the box. So you buy our hardware, you download our software, and it unpacks and kind of works, which I think for a lot of people who've never really jumped into SDR could be a factor. It's like anything really, Phil. It depends where you get your kicks. If it's the challenge, maybe, it is good to start. Let's start low cost, make sure it's something I want to get into. Start with a dongle. If you want something that's going to just kind of get you up and running and receiving signals that bit faster, then our RSPs attempting to address that.
Right. And again, too, I kind of equate it to like the Apple of the SDR world, right? Because Apple makes the hardware and the software. It's all in one. Whereas I don't know if you guys think the same way, but you guys are making the hardware and you guys are making the software. So it's a whole in one solution that everything kind of works together. And the software is very, very polished. I mean, the software is very beautiful. So let's back, if you don't mind, backtracking a little bit, because we covered a whole lot in the first 8 minutes or so here. So you've got 3 flavors, and these are Generation 2 flavors now at this point, right? You had the RSP1, now the RA, and then it was an original Rspdx that you've now replaced, well, the Rspdx is the current line?
There was the original RSP1, which was really our first product. And we, it was okay, but we learned as we got into it.
Well, everybody does, yeah.
And so the RSP1A is the current modern version of the original RSP1, and it has improved filtering, it's got better temperature stability and a bunch of other stuff,
which is very important too.
So that's the history of the entry level lowest price product. Then we had, for a while, the RSP2, and that came in 2 forms. There was an RSP2 and an RSP2 Pro, and the only difference was a plastic case to a metal case.
Gotcha.
So that RSP2 was pretty good. It had the extra antennas to software selectable antennas. It had the external clock inputs, and it started to add additional notch filters for the broadcast bands. That got superseded a year or so back by the Rspdx, which is, we found actually that the people liked that metal case so much that we
it's nice. It's a nice touch. No pun intended. But when you have the device in your hand and you're holding it, I mean, it feels like it's a substantial piece of radio in your hand. It's not. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the radios you get these days too, they're plastic based. So even like the amateur radios that you get, even commercial radios, right? They've all got that plastic shell on the outside of it. I mean, this is you pick this thing up and it's like, and you put it down on the desk. You've got something
serious paperweight. So it's available just as a metal case. It has this enhanced performance below 2 megahertz. It's got an additional. There's a lot of people who like to go after these non-directional beacons down in the hundreds of kilohertz.
Yep.
They go chasing that stuff, and there's a whole bunch of people who enjoy all the antenna experimentation involved in, because you're talking about wavelengths which are tens of miles long,
Yes.
And so the normal, even the magnetic loops that go pretty low start to run into difficulties. So there's a whole world there that is addressed also by the Rspdx, and then the RSP Duo came out just before we brought the DX, and that's the dual tuner. And
right.
And that's like I say, for these simultaneous. I hear from I'm not that close to the sort of scanning community personally, but what I hear is that a lot of these people, they typically have different generations of scanners, and what they really enjoy is with these SDRs is they start to just leave one now hit, and people they may have a mixture of dongles and RSPs, and then they just leave them going, and they just set the scanner software running, and just come back and see what's there. And it's kind of a constant thing. And to be able to do 2 channels with one device is not 2 channels, 2 totally different scans. One could be scanning ATC, another one could be scanning some military band.
Right. Now, can the Duo do, because you're saying too, your products do 10 megahertz of bandwidth at, visible bandwidth at a time. Does the Duo do 2 10 megahertz, or is it?
No.
Is it compressed?
Everything that we do, it has to go down the USB connection to the computer. And that does give a kind of throttling bottleneck limitation. So we're actually limited to 2 separate 2 megahertz chunks. So you can have, now, with the scanner, I should say, the scanner actually scans from start to stop. It's actually doing a scan. So the scanner can run with one instance of SDRuno, and you can just set it running across, tens of megahertz. But at any point in time, when it finds the signal and stops, you've only then got up to 2 megahertz visibility.
Gotcha. All right, so that makes a lot of sense then.
Yeah. So there's the three products, and obviously we're not close to anything new in the very near future, but we're always looking at future.
Of course. Of course, there's always tweaks and everything else, and exactly. What did you learn from this product that you can then bring on to the next one? And that's just the natural evolution of any product. So you were talking about the front end notch filters as well on these, and the software selectable, the Rspdx. Those are software selectable, so that's something. The notch filters are software selectable as well, because if say somebody wanted to listen to AM and they want to do AMDXing, that's perfect then. Okay,
that's right. So if you want to hear this stuff, obviously you don't notch it out.
Right, yeah. Right. Well, that was I just want to clarify that. So, but again, you brought on a good point too. Somebody may come into this with their $30 RTL version, right? Just to get their feet wet and to see where things are going and how things are progressing and what they can do with it. And then all of a sudden, though, you start going, okay, there's the 2.4 megahertz that I can see at one time, and you jump through like SDR Sharp and you start panning around and you start looking at things, and then you come to an advanced device, something like the SDRplay device, and then you bring in 10 megahertz. And then all of a sudden, you kind of, your jaw drops and you lean back in your chair and you go, holy cow, I can see all of this now at once. And just to put in perspective of what 10 megahertz can give you, think about just even the FM broadcast band, right? That would give you from 92 to 102. I mean, that's a lot of radio stations that just sit just in there. But then when you bring it into something that's not wideband, something that is like public safety or even trunking or something like that, where you've got signals that are 12.5 kilohertz, right? And then, or 6.25, and you look at how many fit in that 10 megahertz real estate, and all of a sudden you're seeing all of this stuff in front of you. Or you're looking at, we had somebody on a couple of weeks ago who talked about looking at their smart meters, the water meters and the gas meters and the electrical meters, and you can see them all over the neighborhood, pinging all over the place. And just the ability to see all of that at once, and then you just realize, like, wow, you've been living in a world that's only 2.4 megahertz wide. And all this other stuff that's out there. I mean, but it's more than just that.
It's a bit like a pair of binoculars that has a bigger range of panning. So
right,
you can go right out wide and then home in on the signal you want. So, I mean, the other thing, the scanning software with SDRuno, which was something that came out. Well, it's over a year ago now, but we're one of the few SDR players to actually have an integrated scanner. So it's absolutely built. It's not a add-on software. Okay. It's actually within the SDRuno software.
Mm-hmm.
And now, in terms of performance today, I wouldn't pretend it is as fast as a Uniden, particularly on memory banks. And we're working on that. It will get much, much faster in version 1.43, which is still a few months away. So it's probably not apples to apples. It won't be as fast if you just set it going through some specific memory banks. However, that's the downside. So once it's running, it will take longer, but it's extremely clean, and because you've got so much control, you can set thresholds that give, depending on what ones you want them to stop on, that you've got really good control over. The scan that's much faster is you can literally stop and start. So you can do the whole airband, start at 118 up to 136 megs, set the interval. In fact, we have preset scans for both the US and the rest of the world, which have different channel spacing. And you can set that going. And again, that's probably a bit slower than equivalent, but it's pretty respectable. And the beauty of it is it's much probably quicker to set up one scan and then think, I now want to change it and do something different. It's very we've got a very nice control panel, which is literally start, stop, interval, and threshold, and it's all visual, so you can actually drag the threshold up and down to the point where it's going to be stopping at sensible signal strengths. So
right, I got you.
So that's all built in. Today, our scheduler is pretty basic, so you just can set it to come on and off at certain times. We're working on a scheduler for the next release of SDRuno, which will allow you to set times, dates, repeated sessions for the future, which again would enhance the use for sort of scanners. So scanning is kind of, it's of all our customers, I mean, it's probably only a few % of them are actually particularly hot on scanning. But the great thing is, ever since we brought the scanner out, we've had nothing but praise, and I think we have actually encouraged quite a few people to jump into SDR because of these capabilities.
And that's exactly the thing too. It's a hand-in-hand thing. Some people get into SDR and they find their way into scanning. Some people are into scanning and find their way into SDR. They kind of do go hand in hand. And a lot of people will start off with, they buy the SDRs because with P25, when they try and scan those systems, there's simulcast issues. And the software can handle that, right, with the cheap dongles. And of course, as you increase with the more expensive dongles, you're just, like you said, you're increasing everything that's on the front end of everything. And, a lot of people get involved with that. Then they open up, like I said, they look at 2.4 megahertz of bandwidth. And they see what they can start doing, and they start getting the taste for the SDR environment. And then, like I said, I upgraded through the ranks, and it's what you can do is not just scanning. It's the looking at the spectrum, and it's finding out like, okay, it's late at night. I have nothing that's really important to me to listen to. Let me just see what's out there. I've had plenty of those nights, and I like to say the secrets that are in the searches, which is exactly what SDR allows you to do, is to search out a lot of things in a short period of time, because you can see 10 megahertz. And for example, I was just watching the federal band like 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a late night and I couldn't sleep, and I was just watching the computer screen go, hoping that just looking at the screen would strain my eyes and make me tired. And the ability to find, I found the what should have been the postal police was active at that hour of the night, really active. So I'm looking at the signal, I'm pumping it through DSD Plus. It's a DMR channel instead of a P25 channel, and it ended up being a postal sorting facility. So now I found out that one signal is double used, same agency using it, but instead of being on P25, it was DMR. And I'm talking to other people who travel the country. They said, oh yeah, we're finding the same thing out. The postal police use P25. The sorting facilities on the off hours, they'll use DMR in the same frequency for their sorting. But even still too, just finding federal trunk systems that I'm too far away, I can't hear it. Well, there they are, clear as a bell, coming in. And again, I never would have seen it, because with the SDR, you see the voice channel spike up, and it's like, okay, there's something going on here, and it helps you hone in on it. So it's, technically, from my desk here, that's still scanning, but from the other side of the computer where you are, that's more of a software-defined radio type of function, because you're looking at exactly what the SDR is showing you. So that's kind of how the left hand and the right hand kind of work together in this.
Yeah, so I was going to say that's particularly cool when maybe there are things that travel much further during special propagation conditions. It might be meteor scatter, or it may be a particular temperature inversion causing, VHF to go much further than it should. And so if you know that there's talk, or the weather patterns are suggesting there could be a lift on, you can maybe set up a scan that you wouldn't normally bother to do, just on the off chance that, hey, I can suddenly see the signals coming from PMR 446 megs or whatever from miles away. Also, when events are on, or the special activities, frequencies often, depending on where you are in the world, but suddenly get reallocated, or special licenses to use unused TV spectrum for whatever communications. And obviously, as long as it's not encrypted and you're not going to do anything with the information, then it's fun to just hear these signals.
Did you know there are ways to help support the Scanner School podcast that doesn't take any time or any extra money on your part? If you go to scannerschool.com/support, you will find we have several ways that you can continue to do your online shopping and help support us. We have links to Amazon. If you click on our link before you go to Amazon, anything you buy from there will help support Scanner School. Now, if you're in the market for a brand new scanner, an antenna, other accessories, we have links to Scanner Master, where you can not only purchase a scanner and accessories, but you can also get your radio programmed. And by clicking on our link before you buy, you are helping to support the podcast. Now, if you're in the market for software, we have links to Butel. And if you want something new to you, we also have links to eBay. Again, just go to scannerschool.com/support before you make your purchases, and you are helping to support Scanner School at no additional cost to you. This session of Scanner School is sponsored by East Coast Pagers. Now, East Coast Pagers is one of my online companies, and we are a Unication, Apollo, and Swiss phone dealers serving the North American market. Now, if you're looking for a personal use pager or one for your department, we can get you a quote at the very best prices. So why does a company like East Coast Pagers support Scanner School? I think that every scanner radio user should at least put one pager in their collection of radios. The reason why is very simple. It frees up your scanner to just do scanning, and then you have one radio that's dedicated to your local fire activity. Now, with a pager, you can have voice storage. You can do tone outs. You can keep it silent. You can go back the next day and listen to what you've missed overnight. It's more than you can do with an out-of-the-box scanner. And with today's pagers having multiple frequencies and even having multiple channels in a scan list, like the Unication G1 can do 8 channels in a scan list. It has 64 memory channels, and out of the box, it comes with 11 minutes of stored voice and a desktop charger. The G2s to G5s, they do P25 Phase 1 and Phase 2 in simulcast environments with stored voice, paging on conventional and P25. Oh, and they're upgradable too to DMR Type 1 and Type 2. They are more rugged than today's consumer-based scanners. And with a pager like a Swiss phone S-Quad, you won't even realize you're wearing one. It'll help keep you informed as to what's going on in your neighborhood. So again, eastcoastpagers.com or contact me directly, Phil at eastcoastpagers.com. Do you have a new scanner? You're having problems understanding how it works? Maybe you're new to the entire Home Patrol database of programming and you can't figure out Sentinel. Did you get a new SDR and you're trying to figure out how to install it? Or you want to learn how to use Unitrunker, DSD+, maybe set up a PieAware, or even just make some changes and you don't understand how this system and the equipment works? The podcast might be great for you, but maybe you need a little bit more of one-on-one help with setting something up. I'm available to do just that with you with our private tutoring sessions. You can book me online by going to scannerschool.com/consulting for a 1-hour session. And it's great because we can actually share computer screens remotely, and I can guide you through step by step as if I was sitting right next to you. So again, book me for an hour at scannerschool.com/consulting for your scanner radio one-on-one tutoring session. National Communications Magazine is your personal library of scanner, CB, GMRS, FRS, MURS, and two-way radio articles written by the best minds in the business over the past 3 decades. Your NatCom personal online access account allows you to download the newest issues of America's Hobby Radio magazine, as well as back issues too. So visit natcommag.com to download your free sample issues and sign up today. That's natcommag.com for National Communications Magazine. I mean, even we got there's a golf course that's about 10 minutes from my house. And they use that course for the U.S. Open. The golf with Tiger Woods was there, right. and just trying to pick out, what all the frequencies are. Of course, when they come into town, it's every 10 years or so. So you have a very small, like a week to hunt these things out. And again, using an SDR would be the best way to just look at that spectrum you expect them to be on, and then just try and find the signals that keep popping up, as opposed to the way I used to be doing it. Because again, it was 10 years ago with a search bank, and you put the frequencies in, from last time around, but they could not be existent anymore, or even an air show, because again, you've got pilots who are just keying up and letting go really fast. The chances of catching that on a scanner through a search range is pretty slim, because they're in and out so fast. But if you watch the waterfall though on a software-defined radio, I mean, you'll know, bink, 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 and those are the ones you write down, and it really does help you cut through a lot of the noise and a lot of the time on trying to figure things out here. One of the things I wanted to touch base on the SDRplay product though is, you said you have the ability to look at large frequencies at the same time. And I'm not personally right now at this point yet too familiar with the SDRuno software. I'm playing around with it a little bit to get my feet wet with it, but I haven't really deep dive super into the software yet. With this software, let's do two questions here with this one. The first one is, can somebody take a RTL dongle and use the SDRuno software just to play around with the software to see if it's something they can get used to?
Yes. So what we've got, because obviously the history of the SDRuno software was we acquired it from a company in Italy called Studio One, and this is going back 5 years, nearly 4 or 5 years. And back then you could buy this Studio One software for $179 just for the software.
Just the software.
Hardware, just the software. And for that, I think you got a security dongle just to make sure you paid your money.
Gotcha. Yep.
Dongle.
That was the hardware.
And that was the hardware. Plus, you then provided your own actual SDR.
Your own radio.
Your radio, and off you went. And it was pretty popular. But we did a deal with a guy who was kind of looking to retire, and we took over this software, and we did a little bit to it. And then we had this decision to make, which was, because we're quite a small company, how to move as fast as we can, make the experience as good as possible for our SDR RSP customers, and whilst also maintain support for all these other radios. And it was just a tough decision, but we decided, look, we'll just have to kind of move on. And then things like the scanner and all these good features have come since the point where we branched away from the version that still works with the old dongle, with the original, dongles. And it basically, there is a version, when you get SDRuno, you also get an XTIO version. So it's called SDRplay EXTIO. And the XTIO interface is a common way to allow any hardware that supports the XTIO interface to communicate to SDR software. So you can use, basically, it's actually about 3 years old, this software. The XTIO version, so it doesn't support all the latest bells and whistles. It doesn't support the new plugin infrastructure. It doesn't have the scanner. But in terms of tuning into signals, upside, lower sideband, AM, FM, stereo, tuning around, getting the experience of the spectrum display with your existing dongle, it will allow you to do all that. So it's kind of, again, for people who start off with a dongle, they could then, and if they're thinking about upgrading to an RSP, they could download our software and get a feel for it. But obviously,
that's exactly what I did. That's exactly. I was leading you into that question to see if it was still valid, but that's exactly how I had that was my first taste with SDRuno was getting through the EXTO version of that one and playing with the software. And it works great. I mean, it's nice to be able to drive test software for the hardware that you're looking to buy. I mean, so that was a great decision on your part to be able to still support that. So, and
there is a webinar. Maybe I'll send you the link.
Yeah, we'll put it in the session notes. Yeah,
there's a webinar specifically on using SDRuno with a dongle. If we get time, we'll try and bring it a bit more up to date, but it always kind of falls behind below the line of priorities.
Well, yeah, because your focus is on the software that really is specific to the hardware you have out right now. But my other part of that question was, because I didn't know where to go with that one, was multi-VFO. Is that something that's supported in SDRuno? Yes.
So SDRuno will support multiple VRXs, virtual, we call them VRXs, virtual receivers. And you can set up as many of these as your CPU will support, really.
Really?
So you actually have duplicate control. You have one main control panel that says, I'm using this part of the spectrum. So it may be the bottom half of the airband, say 118 to 128. And then you can have, 10 different receivers, actually each one set to a different channel, just quietly listening. And then you can mute. I mean, obviously, if they're all active and you have them all turned on through your audio, you're going to have 10 channels at once. But you can mute ones. You can wait and visually see, something's going on this one. Unmute it. So you can, in a very manual way, you can operate like that.
Gotcha. So I mean, my mind is moving with the different things you can do with that one, too. I mean, that's that.
And you can
you can record them all, too.
Record. all through. So on the production version with an RSP, you can actually pipe them each one through to one of our plugins is an audio recorder.
Okay.
Within it's probably only a month or so away, we'll have this scheduler that I mentioned that will allow you to be a lot more smart in terms of what channels, either from a memory bank or preset that you want to, at midnight this time, I want to record this channel.
Gotcha. Because
So
I'm thinking like aviation, that's huge, because at certain times of the day, they may shut off a frequency and move everybody over to another one, just based on band conditions, right? Especially the transatlantic flights and stuff like that. But I'm thinking even with aviation too, can you take these VFOs and I guess you can pipe them out independently to different, I guess, would you be able to send them out to a virtual sound card, or they all come out the same
They all come to
tunnel,
virtual audio
okay,
recorders, virtual audio cables, and then you can pipe them to wherever. I mean, some people like to use Audacity, for example, because they're familiar with it. It'll pipe into Audacity.
Okay. Because I'm thinking with ACARs, because we've got, the message, the aviation messages, because it's not just one frequency. I mean, it's multiple different frequencies that the information is going out on. And I have JFK Airport and LaGuardia Airport, depending on the traffic, about 30 to 45 minutes to the west of me. So I've got planes all day long coming in and going out, and I've got Islip MacArthur another hour away the other direction, and it's, so there's constant traffic going overhead, and just by watching it with my ADSB receiver, you know what's going on. But if I try and just sit on one ACARS channel, I can see the other ones piping around and saying,
so
you're missing out.
The alternative thing you can do, we have an IQ recorder which will record the entire spectrum. I think that comes into its own there, where you say, right, I'm going to select this 10 megahertz slot, and I'm just going to record everything. Now, this does eat up your hard drive, because it's like a gigabyte of memory per minute or two. But as long as you can run it off to a disk or delete it when you realize there's nothing you really wanted. But that facility's there, and then you can go back just as though it was real-time audio. People sometimes get confused because it stores it as a WAV file, but only in the sense that WAV is a well-defined wrapper for anything, normally an audio file. So, but people do get confused saying, I tried to play this WAV file, and I tried to play back my recording as a WAV. It's a WAV file specifically for playing back using SDRuno. So you set it to record an hour of this stuff, and then you come back, and instead of recording off air, you select your file that you've saved, and then it's just like you were connected to an antenna, but totally offline. Nice. You can tune around. You can look at the signal. Oh, there's one. I wonder what that is. Oh, it's a funny data signal. Oh, I need to launch ACARS, a DSD plus fast lane, whatever, to decode the P25, whatever you're doing.
That's interesting.
The other area with scanning, of course, is trunking. And to be honest, where we are there, we've launched this plugin facility, and there's a lot of kind of excitement around that. And I think there are some developers now looking to add to the community a plugin capability that will start to make this stuff a bit more seamless. As of today, Phil, there are some, again, enthusiasts. There's a groups.io called SDR Trunk. It's not very big, but if you join it and look, there are people saying, yeah, I got my Rspdx working using some Dragon software. I mean, to be honest, don't ask us to support it, because we haven't got a clue how it works.
Right.
People, obviously we'll provide all the help with our API, and we're helping the developers, but it seems that people are starting to find ways of using the Unitrunker software for this business of matching up which channel is being used when.
Yep.
It's interesting because some people say, well, yeah, actually, I just listen to all the channels because it's only time sharing between them. And if I'm listening to them all, I can see them all anyway, and I can pick up what's going on.
Right.
But then there are others who want, look, here's the trunking information. I want that to drive. So I do hear all sides of the conversation or the whole conversation before it disappears. And it's in that area where I know various Unitrunker stuff going on,
right?
Which people are finding ways to work. But I wouldn't say to the newcomer to SDR, day one, you'll load up your RSP and press a button and be doing trunk radio, because it's not yet that.
Right. It does take a setup. Yeah.
It
exactly.
takes some setting up. And
but that shouldn't deter anybody from it, because it's part of the hobby, though. Part of the hobby is playing and tinkering,
And I think as time goes by, people are going to come out with more one-stop shop.
I'm waiting for that day. That's where I see everything going. I really see the scanner radio hobby morphing more into an SDR-based platform, only because it's more universal. And like you were saying, you've got one radio that does pretty much, I don't want to say DC to daylight, but it feels that way. It really feels like you can go from the basement bands all the way up into the gigahertz, and anything in between is fair game. So,
if people want to come forward from the scanning community to talk more about what they want out of the SDRuno plugin software, I'll mention a couple of Facebook groups. There's if you just go to groups on Facebook, is the easiest way to do it, and type in SDRplay, you'll get to the big one, which is all things SDRplay. And there's another one specifically on SDRuno. The first one has 15,000 members. The second has got about 7. So they're very active, very helpful people who can just answer questions. But like I say, only a few % of them are probably real wizards on scanning specifically. Right. However, there's also a smaller growing Facebook group, which is SDRuno Plugin Developers. And that group, there's a bunch of developers on there exchanging ideas on doing cool new plugins. And people have, in fact, there was a post the other day from Eddie McDonald, I think it was, saying, hey, anyone interested in a smooth version of Unitrunking software for DSD Plus Fastlane? And he was going to make a nice little plugin to stitch this stuff together. And I think if real scanning buffs come in and say, well, if you do that, make sure you do this, or don't do that, or I only need this, it all just helps steer the new software. And it is all about the software. So, so that's kind of cool.
I know I'm a member of the you were talking before too about the groups.io. So that's very busy as well, right? The groups.io email list for SDRuno, or is it SDRplay? I forget which one it is. Probably SDRplay, right?
Yes, so there's a groups.io. There's another SDRplay forum. If you just go to our website and click on community links or community, it's got all the links. That's probably the easiest way to do it. I would like to mention there's a guy in the UK. I'm not sure how big your audience is in the UK, but
we're pretty global. We got people all over the place.
But likewise, this group I think is of interest around the world. The guy Rick King is the moderator and also author of a ongoing book of frequency guides, particularly for aircraft is his thing. So there's a group, it's UK AFG, so it's UK Airband Frequency Group, I think that stands for, and it's ukafg.co.uk, and he hosts that, and you can kind of join it. I think it may be a subscription model, but this is just chapter and verse on frequency stuff, on scanning. And the reason I mention it, he's got his own Facebook group as well, which is called, NUKS. So it's the National UK Scanning Group. Again, a Facebook group. And he's so helpful. If anyone has a question about SDRs and scanning, this guy's just tremendous at providing help. He just enjoys helping people. So that's, again, for people who might get into it and find that, they've got so many questions. It's great to have places like that to go. So I thought I'd just mention that.
Yeah, no, it's the more resources, the better. So, in fact, I'm working on right now is a crash course on how to get set up on SDRs, and then a paid course that will really like get you into like the nuts and like what we're talking about here with Unitrunker and DSD Plus Fastlane and you know, plugging things in and making, you know, this software talk to that software. And there's a lot. I mean, there is definitely getting you somebody up and walking in an SDR that's the easy part. Then really like working on the muscle development and everything else beyond that, that's where things can take a turn. But it's not impossible. It's not an impossible task, but it's a fun task. It's one of these things. And once you start, you know, seeing all the different things you can do, and again, we were saying before, being able to do shortwave and then also doing 800 megahertz, right, on a single radio. If you were to break down everything you'd have to buy in order to do that on separate pieces of equipment, I mean, you'd spend a couple $100 just on the shortwave radio, then a couple $100 just on a VHF UHF combo, and something that does trunking and everything else. I mean, the ability to, like you were saying, $119 from HRO, which again is a US based company, but you've got dealers and distributors all over the world.
Yeah, we've got a link on the website, just distributors on and just go to that. And most countries have local language in many cases to help provide technical support locally.
Right. And that's the other great thing about your product too. It's one product globally. It's not like where it's a UK variation, an Australian variation, and a United States variation. And then only the United States gets the software upgrades. You know, I mean, I've seen that. It's like everybody focuses here. And then the guys over like, you know, the side, you know, by you, on the other side of the pond are like, hey, what about us? You know, where's our patches? Where's our firmware upgrades? So it's nice that it's the ability to be, and again, you're not worried too about voltage conversions and stuff like that because it's USB powered and it's 5 volts and that's universal. I mean, it's a great
I think
market
the other thing, just looking a bit further forward in the way this whole hobby is going to evolve, is that over time, I think that there's going to be it's kind of machine learning, but ultimately, where do you focus? Where do you tune? It's going to be a combination of. At the moment, we're providing visual stimulus. Oh, look, I can see stuff. We're providing scanners that you can set up to very cleverly just go through whole banks of frequencies, but it's still very much today's computing, if you like. But just imagine in the future where you'll have smart algorithms analyzing the Twitter sphere, and you'll have loads of options depending on your interests or whatever. I mean, it's quite voyeuristic in some way, but you know what I mean is like if you're really wanting to know, you know, there's kind of world news, hot spots, what's going on, or often there's you know, hurricanes going on that don't even hit the news. If that's your thing, then suddenly banks of frequencies dynamically populated to have maybe a chance of picking up some, particularly this is down on HF, where propagation is truly global, or satellite frequencies. But, you know, suddenly you can be scanning. It's almost like content-specific scanning.
Yeah.
So it's kind of context. So you're not trawling through. It's suddenly, I want to hear stuff in the French language because something's kicking off in French, and I happen to know French. You know, and you don't have to even listen to anything in a different language. And I think that's where a lot of the hobbyists will have an interest in programming. Right. New tools in the future to bolt together to this SDR scanning technology. So that's
right.
Just
and again, and you just, you know, again, I'm constantly thinking as you tell me all these different things you could do in the scheduler too. It's like that's perfect. So you can actually set up when the Meteor satellites come overhead. So you can schedule your via the software to tune to those frequencies, and then after that, then move off and go back to something else. So only during only during those time passes, or you know, exactly what you're saying is with the weather and all that stuff. You know, you want to see what's going on over there, or if you want to even tune into, I mean, even when there's natural disasters, the amateur radio community reserves sets of frequencies to say, hey, stay off these frequencies because there might be stations in these areas. And again, you can schedule that as well.
Times of day when everyone goes quiet, just listening in case there's a little tiny ham radio signal coming from the other side of the globe.
Exactly. So it's amazing. I mean, all these different things you can do, and software-defined radio allows you to do these things. You know, it's crazy.
I think that might be another side effect of people who probably up till now have only been scanning up on VHF and above. Okay, and that's got their interest. Then they get into SDR, and this is another great thing with our RSPs that go all the way down through shortwave and below.
Right.
Then it's actually, I wonder whatever is this stuff down there, and they suddenly discover a whole new world of.
Yes.
Again, our scanner, can be set the threshold if there's. You could just set. It's not so channelized down there, which is an issue because it's just crammed and there's so many signals simultaneously that it's just noise and hubbub. Even so, you kind of know that on the 10-meter amateur band, it's dead quiet, apart from 2 days a month, where you could just set something running. Oh, there's something going on, and then you turn on and find it.
Right. Well, again, too, even with shortwave broadcasts, they have a schedule. Right, certain shows come on at certain radio stations, and again, to be able to schedule that so you don't miss it, or set it up so that it records later on. Because again, there's one I just discovered. It's not, what is it called? Not Another Radio Show or something like that. And what they'll do is they'll have an audio broadcast, and then right after the audio broadcast, they'll overlay short SSTV on top of it. So
it's not a radio show, I think it's called. That's very impressive. Yeah, you can pick up these really cool images, and of course the International Space Station.
Yes, one of my favorite things to do.
Also slow scan TV pictures you can decode. It's really cool. And to your point about these DX stations, if you set your recording to be like 59 minutes to the hour till 1 minute after. You're guaranteed to pick up the station ID at the top of the hour, which most stations do, and tricks like that are a lot of fun.
Yes,
and so
exactly.
You could actually do the whole of shortwave in 3 chunks and just record it 2 minutes every hour, and then go back and say, I wonder what's there. Oh, this is a good time of day for this.
So we haven't really talked about shortwave at all on this podcast yet. We haven't really gone down that path.
No,
not to hold you up or anything else like that, but if somebody wanted to pick up the Rspdx, right, which allows you to have 2 antenna ports, which is the model that I have.
3 antenna ports.
Oh, it's 3 antenna ports on it.
There's 2 SMAs and a BNC which is handy for people who use these mag loops.
Right. So is that what you would recommend though for somebody who's getting that's taken an interest in the Rspdx and so shortwave radio might be something I want to do? A magnet loop is something you would recommend just to get started out with? I mean, is that something? Yeah,
I think for antennas, you can do a lot with just a piece of wire. If you get that piece of wire away from electrical noise, which is an increasing problem. And in urban environments, crowded housing space, whatever, it's really tough. And that's where these magnetic loops come into their own. We're actually going to be upgrading our website to start to advise a bit more on mag loops and other.
I saw you had a recent blog post that went into that. That's also why I was asking you about that. So, but I've tried that random wire and it didn't work here. My property is small. It's not. I mean, for where I live, it's 100 feet by 60 feet, which I don't know how that translates over to meters for you, but it's a postage stamp basically. And I tried running it zigzag in my attic space, back and forth, back and forth across the house, and then out the gable vent, and then across the backyard. And all it picked up was noise. It was horrible.
It's almost like forget all the zigzag length. Just if you could just, 100 feet is quite a good length. You should be able.
Yeah, but that's front to back. That's I'm in the house is in the middle.
So, okay. If you can throw it over the top of the roof and get it out of the attic a bit. I mean, it's better. The trouble is in the attic, it's typically a load of wiring and mains cables, which are just antennas radiating all the noise.
Yep. And I have no trees on my property either. I cut them all down, a long time ago. I have cypress shrubs up. I could probably but then again, the landscaper is going to come by with his weed whacker.
It could be a sloping antenna. I mean, the key thing is get a bit of coax to get it out of the house, and then either just there's a lot to get into with matching and stuff like that, which you can learn later. But the main thing is get the noise level down and get enough of a strength of signal from a piece of wire. And if you're really constrained, then the magnetic loop is a great way to go because it just works from the magnetic field. And most of the interference is low, short distance electrical noise.
Right. So you eliminate all the electrical by going to the magnetic side of the house.
There's also some cool noise filters and things which you can get into on our product, which start to help you lift signals out of the noise. But that takes time, and it's a bit frustrating if you can't hear anything until you do that. It really isn't a good experience.
Exactly.
But again, join the Facebook group, and you can describe your setup as a newcomer and say, look, I've got this, what should I do? And they're so helpful. It's really good. And the biggest kick we get is from the fact that there's this kind of loyal community of enthusiasts, and it's just fun,
All right. So we talked about a lot as far as resources and Facebook groups.io, the website. If somebody is really interested in learning more right now about the product, about both the software and the hardware, where would you direct them to go?
Just come to our website, Phil, SDRplay.com, www.sdrplay.com, and, start there, and we'll guide you from there. There's links every which way from that point.
Mm-hmm. And the website is very well done. Let me say it's nice, it's smooth, and the ability to find what you're looking for on there. Because when I was researching it, what I wanted to buy as far as an SDR Play, I didn't know which one to go with. Right, it was either the RSP1A one that we were saying, the RSP1A, the Rspdx, or the RSP Duo, and I went back and forth for a long time as to which was the one I was going to settle in on. And the website, really, after digesting what you had on there and looking at the different versions of it, I mean, the more I looked at it, the more clear it became as to, for me, the Rspdx would be the best solution for me. And, the website made it, like I said, I overanalyze what it is I'm going to buy. I don't just go out to say, I'm going to buy this one and just pull the trigger on it. That's not my personality. So when I say it took me a while to figure it out, it's because I had to go through my own personal process of it. But the website, that's the way you have it laid out, makes it very easy to do that. And the ability too for me to just dip my toe in the water with SDR Play with the RTL dongles and just get an idea of what it is I'll be doing with your hardware inside of your software. The software is polished. I mean, there's no better way to say it. I mean, it's done very nicely. The font, the texture, the way you navigate through things, it really does make the entire experience of using software-defined radios very enjoyable.
That's great feedback, and I'll share that with Andy as our sort of software architect, and he just loves to hear feedback like that. So thank you, Phil.
Perfect. So, all right. So anybody who's interested and is looking, again, SDRplay.com.
And HRO in the US, obviously, your local ham radio outlet will be more than happy. I mean, at the moment, they're still on click and collect, but I hope that will open up quite soon in 2021 to the point where you can breeze in and get a demo,
Nice. That'd be great. And again, we'll put links to all this stuff in the show notes, and also all the Facebook groups that we discussed will also be in the session notes for today's podcast as well. So, John, I can't thank you enough. I mean, you're our first guest over from the UK, right? It's great to have you on there. And again, I want to thank you because the time shift, I want to thank you for spending your afternoon recording this session with us. I really do appreciate it.
It's been great fun, Phil. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with your audience.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. John, thank you for your time and joining us on the podcast. It was great to talk to you about SDR Play and SDRuno and how people can get started with SDRuno even before they purchase the hardware. It's like taking the hardware for a free test drive before you make the purchase. And that is how I got, again, like we talked about in the interview, how I got started with SDRuno, and that really had me craving an SDR Play device. Again, in our session notes, we'll have links that John and I talked about through the podcast. There were quite a few links. You can find them all at scannerschool.com/session170. We will also be showing some tutorials in our premium SDR course, which will release shortly. And again, if you're interested in software-defined radios, check out our webinar at scannerschool.com/webinar. And now here is an open call again for anybody that wants to come on the podcast. We've been having pretty much every episode, I think, this month has had a guest on it. And it makes my life a whole lot easier because I don't really have to come up with the content. But it's nice to be able to break away a little bit and bring some variations into the podcast. So it's not just me talking, right? It's nice to have a little bit of back and forth. It makes the podcast a little bit more enjoyable, at least for me to listen to it. So if you want to be a guest on the podcast, as you can tell, it's no super crazy thing, right? You come on the podcast, we have a conversation, we talk about what it is that you have been working on, or your expertise, or something that you found interesting in the scanner radio or software-defined radio market. Just come on the podcast. Go to scannerschool.com/guest. That's the fastest, easiest way to get yourself on the podcast. We have a calendar set up there, and all you do is click on the date and time that works best for you. It's on the calendar, it couldn't be any easier. So again, all the session notes are available from today's podcast at scannerschool.com/session170. And again, guys, you all know the drill, right? You know the speech by now. If you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, please subscribe. And if you're watching us over on YouTube, or listening to us rather on YouTube, make sure you click subscribe and hit the bell so you know when a new video or new podcast is released on our YouTube channel. But most importantly, if you are enjoying the content that we have here, please share this with somebody, whether it be via an email or on Twitter or on your Facebook groups. That's how you can help us grow, and also how you can help us help more people, because that is the goal here at Scanner School. We want to be able to help as many people with the scanner radio hobby as possible. So with that, I'm Phil Lichtenberger. I want to thank you again for your support and for listening and enjoying Scanner School, where we teach you everything to know about the scanner radio hobby. We'll catch you all again next week. 73, everyone.